you don't. You don't really move on from grief. You actually move forward with it. The goal here is not to erase the pain, but actually to integrate that grief to the parts of our lives, right? Maybe when you ask, like, okay, how do I move on? What you might really be saying is, how do I get away from this pain, right? Because grief is something associated with, like, actually acknowledging the emotional needs that you need, actually acknowledging the emotional behavior, reactions that you have, the emotional damage that you actually went through. But if you don't want to, if you're asking yourself, like, how do I actually move on from that grief, you're actually trying to get away from that pain even more. But here's the thing though, the more you run away from that grief, the more that pain of grieving will actually chase you down. Now, every man fear of exposure, right? Every man is scared to be vulnerable. Every man doesn't want to get any near to something to do or areas around vulnerability, weakness, or anything to do that will expose his vulnerability, because he fears that if he is exposed because of his vulnerability, he will actually, like, something to do with that will actually lead to failure, right? And because because that thing will actually lead to failure, us men don't want to get any near to that. And if we think of our grief, right? I'm gonna just the frame is better like this, right? I hope the frame is better like this, because I like speaking with, like, more of a distance from the camera more rather than being too close to the camera. Because then when we are afraid of failure, right, as men, when we're afraid of failure, we will not get any point to being near or close with it. And what does that look like? How does that connect to grief, right? Grief is something to do with acknowledging the emotional damage that we have. Grief is something to do with going down on ourselves, descending on ourselves, which means going down, and actually looking at the emotional damage that shapes who we are today. All right, like, let's say your father passed away, like mine. You grieve of that loss, right? But for some people, if you actually watch this video, you actually think that you want to move on from that grief, right? And then this is because you don't want to get any near to failure, to vulnerability, because when you're grieving, you're acknowledging your emotional damage, and acknowledging your emotional damage, for a man, how we define it, is equivalent to something that is weak, to something that is vulnerable, something that we must stay away out of, because our brain is actually wired. Our brain has this, like, beliefs that we need to have strength, and men doesn't cry, men doesn't, men don't need to acknowledge those wounds, those emotions, because then we will not be seen as strong. We will not be seen as a source of strength. That's why a lot of guys these days stay as boys, because they actually don't want to emotionally acknowledge the damage that they got, right? They don't want to acknowledge their emotional damage, their emotional wounds, their traumas. And so we don't want to get any near into those areas. We don't want to get any near into those part of our hearts that are more emotional, because we think that those part of our hearts that's emotional are lack of strength. And actually, if you think about it, a lot of men these days says we must stay strong, we must be disciplined and all that. But actually, they're boys. They're immature of saying that. The more mature man is actually the man that can cry, the man that can really relate to a lot of these authentic other men that also undergo initiation that significantly impacted their emotional heart, their heart. So they have to actually acknowledge those emotional wounds in order for them to actually be mature, in order for them to work their life, work their way through life without those emotional needs and not sabotaging your relationships, not sabotaging your work, your career. More of these sabotaging in another video. Now, just continuing on that, we avoid grief because when grief actually hits, right, we might actually try our best to avoid it, try our best to numb it or distract ourselves, because getting near to any of that wound, it feels weak or it feels dangerous. So we want to put it out of our sight. But then when we bury that feeling of the need to grieve, when we bury that feeling of anything to do, any association with the negative side, with the sadness, with weakness and vulnerability, it will actually slowly seep into our relationship, and also it will slowly seep into our career, into our work, like I mentioned before, of like affecting you, how you talk, how you deal with conflict with people, especially your partner, because that's when you open up all your qualities to your partner, right? And this can sabotage your life like miserably. Now, if you want to know more on how you can consciously provide yourself with the beliefs that are right and remove those false beliefs and actually be conscious and aware of your surrounding, on how you can become and you can live up to become a man that is more mature and more like, you can basically be aware of everything that is around you and you can actually lead in relationships, then link in the description below. I have a full guide on how to heal the inner child within, so you can learn about, like, in depth, you can be an expert on how to actually grieve two things. You can be an expert and you can have guidance on how to walk your way out of this unconscious shadows that you have within you, and how to address those unmet needs that you have, so it's not going to sabotage in your day-to-day lives. Link in the description below. Now, every time you have a grief, right, like let's say my father passed away from autoimmune disease, which causes him to have acute kidney, it planted a belief in me that life is unfair, that life is unsafe. I am unsafe. I will never get love. If I open up, I'll get hurt, and I'll never be okay. Now, these false beliefs, right, I'm just reading it off my notes. These false beliefs can actually affect who you are today, right? Because that false belief is actually some kind of like a survival threat that you have. That false belief is a protective strategy that your body builds due to that survival threat, because your body is trying to survive from that threat of you losing that person. Because of course, like let's say you lost one of your caregivers, like my father. Back then when you were a child, I mean until now as well, the person that you can depend emotionally on is your caregivers, is your father or mother, right? If you don't have any of those, then your child within you will feel unsafe, because you don't have any of those caregivers around you anymore. You don't have that emotion. You cannot rely your emotional needs. You cannot depend emotionally on those people, right? That's what we need. Like let's say if we're a baby and then our parents just drop us out of nowhere in the street, like we will get run over by a car. We literally cannot survive physically, but emotionally as well, because they are actually our emotional container. The way we like let's say we throw a tantrum, right? We cry out loud, we get mad. We can only do that when they are around us, right? You can only do that while we are a child. When we're a child back then, the only person that we can we can express our emotions to is our parents, our father, mother, maybe your uncle, maybe your grandpa, any caregivers that were there for you. But if let's say they pass away, right, you lost them because of something, because of death, let's say, right, that's the moment where you want to grieve on it. And when you don't want to grieve on it, you will bring that sort of belief that Okay, now they're gone. Now I don't have anyone in my life. Now I'm unsafe to the world. What do I do? And so when you bring that, and when you don't address, and when you don't answer that question and actually replace the beliefs, the lies with truth, you will bring that everywhere. You will sabotage relationships between you and your partner, between dealing with conflicts with that false belief of me being unsafe, me never getting love. If I open up, people will attack me, all those stuff. It's built because, well, you don't want it to be built, but because your immature child within you is building that as a defense mechanism. So every time you go through like a conflict with the person, and then you feel that conflict, like let's say with your partner, and you feel that conflict, that partner will leave you if there is some sort of conflict. So you feel unsafe, but your reaction is like not in proportional to what the situation actually needs. So that's why the boy within you is like, oh, that partner, like your partner is going, like my girl, my woman is gonna leave me because she doesn't like me, because she is, you know, she's angry at me, and she's gonna leave me like dad did, or like mom did, like whoever passed away that you have to grieve on from your family system, right? From your family members or anyone that you love and you lost them. But that's not true, right? That's not your true self. That's just your inner child thinking that if the person is angry or the person is mad, then I will lose them, right? And that's what we have to fix, because out of nowhere, the symptoms that you can see, it can come out as triggers, right? When you're triggered by that person of like them getting mad at you or something, and then you will have that like false belief like occurring at that specific moment, at that split second, and then you will be like, oh, that person's gonna leave me, that person's gonna abandon me like dad did because dad wasn't here, blah blah blah, all those immature childhood beliefs. You have to work through it. If not, literally it can come out as anything. You can suddenly just lash out on them, you can become angry at them, right? And you can be tough to the point like hardness. You can be angry all the time. You can even like insult them as well. You're quick to like insulting them because you feel unsafe. Your body's unsafe. You know, this is like a threat. You don't want them to leave you. You want them to still love you. But in real life, they're not gonna leave you. They just want to say their point, you know? But the childhood you still thinks that this is some kind of a threat. This is some kind of like a moment where they're gonna leave us, right? And then of course you cannot fix that in one go. That's why you have to work on your inner childhood work. You have to sort of actually grieve on that, grieve on the loss, so you can integrate it in your lives. Now the way forward, the way out is actually not to toughen up, right? You don't want to be affected by these beliefs again. The only way to do that is actually by looking forward to grieving, right? Who did you lose, right? For me, I lost my father. The way I grieve it is by listening to the music that he used to listen to, and actually looking past of him and like being grateful that he was there for me back then, being appreciative and actually forgiving him from a lot of things, repenting for the lies and the mistakes and the sins that I've done that can also affect him in the afterlife. And so I always and always bring it back to God, because that's the only way. That's the only way forward that you can go past these traumas of losing someone and actually grieving into it. Because you want to rewire your brain and your body to feel safe with grieving. You want to actually touch up to that vulnerable area of you, and you actually want to actually man up. You know, if you want to become a man, you want to become a hero that is conscious and aware, that can actually bless his families and his communities. You have to first bless yourself. You have to first work on that inner child of yourself in order for you to be conscious and not just lash out and not just have this embodied feeling of unsafety towards everything in your life. Because if you feel unsafe and you have no trust, then you cannot trust your children, you cannot feel safe with your wife, right? And a lot of conflict will happen because of you. Do you really want that, right? No, you don't want. You want to see your children happy. You want to see them smile. You want to see them playful just as you are. And you want to see your wife actually opening up to you, opening up to yourself. That's the beautiful thing when you have a family that is conscious and aware. Because I wasn't. And many mistakes that I've gone through, even though I try to grieve it as well, still, this is still a healing journey that's gonna go for forever, right? But I can actually help you and guide you to reach that conscious self even faster and become the hero of your life. And if you want to do it, link in the description down below, and you can join the program. It's cheap, and I'll personally help you doing like a group weekly calls. You can ask me anything and I will create the course for you. Here's some steps you can take though. Even though you like, let's say now you know that you have to grieve, right? Now you know that you will never move on from grieving. You will grieve forever. That's the beauty of the story. That's God's fate, right? Let's say you lost that person, that's God's fate. You have to just deal with it and going back to him, because let's say that fate can actually, like, God might be actually reminding you because you have lack of intimacy with him. So maybe you losing that person means a lot of things, because you want to stop, pause, and actually learn from it. What is God trying to tell me from here? Is God trying to say to me that I have to be more closer to him? That I have to build a better relationship with God himself from this loss? Am I too attached to this worldly, worldly things? No, worldly things is not just materialism, right? It's also people. You don't want to be too attached to the person that you lost. Because you don't want to be attached to anything in the world. The only entity that you want to be attached to is God, because the world is unstable. And if you want to be stable yourself without being affected by the world, you have to be connected. You truly want to be connected with God and have full intimacy with him. And in order to do that, is first you have to actually acknowledge the loss that you have. Right? You have to acknowledge the wound. You have to name exactly what you lost and how it hurts you. Now you can write it down in your notes. I write down in my notes most of the time because it keeps track of what I feel throughout the day. You can have your journal book for this. But you can also have you just think to yourself as well. But in my opinion, you want to record it in your book, so you, like in a notebook, so you understand why you go through these, beliefs that you have, and the wound that builds up. You want to write it down, because healing starts when the truth is actually spoken. You want to bring something to the light. You want to be what is it called? You don't want to go far away from vulnerability. You want to be vulnerable and actually bring that problem to light, right? And the second thing you can do is to actually feel without shame. You want to give yourself the permission and safeness to actually cry and pray and actually bring that grief, bring that hurt, bring that pain to God. That's why I said you want to acknowledge the wound first, and then you want to bring it to God and actually ask him help, his guidance, and ask him, God, what are you teaching me from this? Because from there you will then have the clarity and the guide to actually walk through your lives, right? And actually you're conscious of that grief, of that wound, of that you lost that person, and now you can be conscious if it's gonna sabotage your relationship or not, because you want to have a beautiful and fulfilling lives, don't you? So you don't want to sabotage yourself in every arenas of your life. And that one step is by bringing back to God. Then you want to release the lies, because like I mentioned before, when you lost someone, your inner child or the boy within you will create these immature false beliefs that will affect you who you are today, by saying that life is unsafe, no one will ever love me. I mean, you're not going to verbally say it, but I'm just telling you this so you know that the boy inside you is actually saying that, right? Because the boy inside you actually doesn't know what's happening right now. Only yourself with your eyes knows what's happening. That's why your body will react first to that threat of someone will leave you. If you feel like, oh, that person will leave me because that person is angry with me, before your mind does, because your body will react first. The trauma that you got, the moment where you lost your one of your caregivers, let's say your father or your mother, whether you lost someone, that trauma will be embodied instead of cognitive. So it's not going to be stuck in your mind. That's going to be within your body. That loss, it will be stuck within your body. So you have to integrate it in your life. Integration means combining two things to become whole. Because if you don't, then the boy inside you will just control your reactions, your emotions, without you knowing, unconsciously. That's like the subconscious self as well. Now, when you learn more about this, it can go from unconscious to subconscious. So you realize more of like what you need and what you have to do. You want to release the lies, right? You want to replace those beliefs of life is unsafe, no one will ever love me, if I open up I will get hurt. You have to replace those beliefs with going to God and saying to God that, God, please heal me, I'm safe, I feel safe with you. That's why you have to sort of do this integrated prayer. And if you want to know more, again, a link in the description below. You want to reframe the beliefs, false beliefs, with the truth, right? That's how you do it, because the only truth that is good is only the truth that is rooted in God's promises. God is the one who's mercy, He's the Almighty, He forgives everyone, right? He will provide the love that we actually need, not from the one that we lost in the world, in earth, but actually like biologically, but actually in a divine way, towards God, and approach God in a divine way. Now, another thing that we can do is actually, we want to honor the memory. Like I said before, I do things that, like, I listen to a lot of this music that my dad used to listen to, right? If you know Brian McKnight, right? One Less Cry. Ah, man, that's like the song that my dad used to listen to all the time. Those like rock style oldies. And I would listen to him while looking at his pictures, old pictures and all that, and being in my prayer, just have this like emotional moment within yourself. Like, isolate yourself in a room and you do this yourself. Maybe write down some letters that you want to say to him. You know, I always look at my old Canva painting. If you see it back there, that's some Canva, some pictures that I have with my dad, with my father. Oh, just to say to you, my father passed away around almost 2 years ago, and yeah, that's what I want to tell you. And perhaps your father also passed away. That's why you watch this video. You actually have to truly grieve with it. Now, if you actually know to grieve with it, if you know that you have to grieve with it, maybe you're watching this video so you can actually be validated that you can actually grieve, and you have the safe space to actually grieve with God within you, and you want to grieve properly. That's also perhaps the reason you're watching this video. Hello. And then lastly, you want to walk with it. Now, grief becomes lighter when it's integrated, not avoided. Basically, this is just combining all the previous steps that I told you before to actually be with it, right? You don't want to just you don't want to just put it out of your life, just remove it. You want to actually deal with it, right? And dealing with it is actually one of the hardest part that you have to do, because everywhere you go, you might have the remembrance of, let's say, your father, right? But that's the beauty of life. That's what you want. That's the beauty of everything here, right? You actually want to remember him. You want to have the remembrance of him and God and your relationship with him, and just dwell back on the memories, because it's something beautiful that you have to be emotionally dependent on and cry on, and it's beautiful. Just love seeing those early moments during our childhood with my father, especially with my sister and my mom as well. Gonna make me tear up. But that's why it can affect us who we are today. And again, if you want to know more in depth and guidance, and if you want to be an expert on knowing how to truly, consciously walk through your life with becoming more fulfilled with your lives, right? Having more emotional freedom, that's like the product of my product, right? Of my program, is having the ability to live out with freedom emotionally, not only physically, not only like having time freedom, but actually going deep into your emotional needs and actually have the freedom to safely and in a mature way express your emotions, so you can bless your children, you can bless your community, your partner, your wife, your girlfriend, the woman with you, your family, your mom, if your dad, if they're still alive, right? Maybe your mom passed away, that's why you're watching this video. Everyone in your life, you can bless yourself and bless others as well. Link in the description below if you want to heal the boy within, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.